Right, so now I'm talking to Martin Veitch of IDG Connect, my co-host at this event. Martin, it's been interesting bringing you into the equation because very often at these events I'm talking purely to people operating within the industry. So there's very much trade-to-trade messages going on there. As a journalist looking out into the bigger, wider world, you obviously deal with a lot of enterprises and people in the real world. What sort of IoT feedback are you getting?
Some of it I think is quite familiar from other early stage markets. I go back and remember things at the beginning of the whole mail order computer industry, or the beginning of mobile telecoms, or the beginning of the web itself, or other trends passim, and some of this is quite familiar, the early stage infancy and the immaturity and the desperate attempts to come up with a brand name. And I think for the man on the street, this stuff is pretty invisible still. I don't think.
You think so? So you're not even getting feedback from sort of large enterprise businesses?
Oh, definitely.
Are they considering IoT?
For the people that have got some clue about IT, definitely.
Yes.
But that's quite a big distinction, isn't it? I don't think many people who might be in the market for a Nest device or a similar home control system think of it as being a function of the Internet of Things. So what I'm saying is, I suppose, either blame the marketing or blame the media, possibly. But it's not set in people's minds as being A, B, or C. And for the organization themselves, enterprises that might consume Internet of Things, then I think they're very interested, but it's at the show up and turn up for a conference, educate me stage for a great many of them.
Right. So going back to that consumer and his thermostat, he may possibly be thinking, he may have heard the words that it's a smart device, but he's not going beyond that into it being an Internet of Things device, then, you don't think?
Yeah, I think what will happen is quite quickly it becomes pervasive, the actual devices, and then we come to a point and we look back and we say, oh yeah, that was the beginning of the Internet of Things that happened just there. You don't say at the time, it happened on the 4th of July at 6 p.m. or whatever. And I think the consumers are going to buy it if the consumer devices are right, as been shown by the success of Nest and other companies. For the big industries, for the big enterprises, well, there'll be clear usage cases in industrial internet, the ones where a company like a GE plays. For the more mainstream enterprise, so I think they're kicking this stuff around and saying, well, what will it really mean for us? And I don't think many people can give them a great answer at the moment.
Well, you referenced this back to earlier major technological developments like the internet, like mobile phones, etc. How do you think the IoT scales with those?
In terms of, scales?
In terms of the potential for the Internet of Things. Is it going to be as big as mobile phones? Is it going to be as big as the internet? Is it going to be bigger than all of them,
It's a bit of a weasel answer, but it always depends on how you define your terms, of course. I mean, the Internet of Things, in a way, is already here, right? We can count a lot of things that have gone on in connected cars and in the way even a council might manage its street lighting system, or a utility might manage power and share that information with consumers. Some of it's already here and existed almost before the name was given. I think that when you compare to something as phenomenal as the internet itself or mobile comms, it could be right up there. I mean, the opportunities are vast.
I could be very wrong, but I see it potentially being bigger than all of those.
Yeah, well, why not?
The internet is perhaps scale beyond, but certainly if we're talking about mobile phones and so on, then this thing embraces so much more than just simple communication.
Yeah, if you think of the internet as being the great big mothership, then this would certainly be one of the bigger satellites, because the potential there is just incredible, isn't it? It's basically connecting all of these dumb devices and giving them some sort of intelligence and means of communicating status, and potentially a lot more. I mean, you could reinvent the way cities work or transit systems work, or you could just completely reinvent the way homes work or offices. I mean, that's pretty enormous in its own right, isn't it?
It is. But it's all about how we use data, isn't it? Vast amounts of data that are going to be generated. What do you see as the main issues with data?
Well, obviously, the one most people will say will be privacy, followed by its kissing cousin, security. I would say that, one of the interesting challenges is what you do with all of the data that's generated. A lot of people would be skeptical and say that a lot of it's just going to be garbage data and no good for anything. But there's a very interesting sort of underlying trend going on in the world today anyway, where a lot of the metadata and data you wouldn't have thought would be too useful is being recycled and repurposed, and is actually very often more useful than the core information you've collected. So I think, collecting that data to understand how people drive, what they do when they're shopping, what they do when it gets dark, what they do when the weather changes will, for instance, help us build much more fit-for-purpose cities and transport systems, for example. I think that'll be absolutely amazing. It's how you make use of the data, isn't it, rather than the data itself.
So what is the Internet of Things? Is it really a way of making the world a better place, or is it a new way to help technology companies make more money?
I'm for the optimistic answer. Hopefully it will make the world a lot better. It certainly has, it's certainly the tools to do a lot of really interesting things. And in fact, I wonder, in terms of the opportunity, the capitalist opportunity, maybe it's a bit less than people think, because the infrastructure, the underlying internet infrastructure is already in place. And it might be a challenge for organizations to monetize this. It's such a new thing. Maybe it'll be the newer companies that come along and really capture the real dough that's available now.
And as far as Internet of Things becoming ubiquitous, are we at the beginning of the end? Is this going to be a reality in your lifetime, or is it going to be 5 years away, or
right.
What would you think?
I think it's the end of the beginning, maybe. That we're probably getting past the first few percent.
Sure.
If you think of it as being one of those sort of status updates when your computer's reloading or your phone is charging or whatever. We're just starting out to see the green against the white background. That would be my hunch. But God knows these things make fools of all of us who try and anticipate what's going to happen next. I've been that fool before, haven't you?
I certainly have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Very good, thanks.